Welcome to Inside Aesthetics, the world's leading podcast for injectors and aesthetic businesses. I'm Dr. Jake Sloane, an aesthetic doctor with over 16 years experience in facial aesthetics.
And I'm David Segal, an entrepreneur and business mentor with over 20 years of experience in our industry. Our podcasts are aimed at industry professionals, and any information or advice given is general in nature. You should consult with a healthcare provider before undergoing any treatment.
You can also subscribe to us on Patreon for on-demand content for injectable and business education. Hey guys, welcome to chapter 12 of What's Trending in Aesthetics.
Welcome, welcome.
Bit of news before we get into this podcast. So first of all, most importantly, our IA competition winner will be drawn tonight.
Exciting. Drum roll.
By the time we're recording this, I can't give you what time, but we'll be trying to do an Instagram live. So follow our Instagram today. Inside Aesthetics Podcast is our handle. And David will be somewhere in Europe.
Yes.
I will be here in Australia and we'll be choosing our special winner. So look out for that tonight, guys.
Yeah. Do you want to remind people what the prize is?
Well, if they've missed it, they can't apply now. But the prize will be a trip to Canada to the Canadian Aesthetics Expo. David and I will be there. Of course, your flights will be paid for, accommodation, your ticket to the cocktail soiree, and 4 days of conferencing, cadaver lab, and business workshop with you.
The only downside is you have to hang out with us.
Yeah. And well, yes, and you definitely do, because we'll be also be doing a mini podcast with you as well.
Yes.
So that'll be fun. Next bit of news, we've recorded some bonus content with Fresh Clinics, who are a company here in Australia. Kind of a bit of an experiment for us. We want to see how we can do things a bit differently. So we're very kindly hosted at Fresh Clinics in their studio, or should I say their headquarters. We're using a new producer, a new way of recording. This will be available as video. So if you're on Spotify or in our YouTube, you'll be able to watch on video. So that's cool. And we just want to explore different types of podcasts, different types of content. Also, this month, David will be away pretty much for the whole month. And then I'm away for a couple of weeks. So there will be 1 or 2 gaps on our Friday podcast, but we're going to pepper some of this bonus content on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
So just for the next 6 weeks, there'll be occasional weeks where there's no Friday podcast, but you might see something on Wednesday instead.
Yeah, there's a few things that have been going on in the background in relation to this. I just did a series of videos and content with Everuse, and essentially talking about business, showcasing a few people out there who are outstanding in the aesthetics world, who've set up great businesses. So just workshopping with them around how they run their businesses, what are their keys to success been, and providing some learnings and takeaways for people that are either starting up their businesses or even if you're a seasoned, mature professional. So we'll be featuring some of that teaser content soon on our Patreon, and then maybe it'll be hosted there in its entirety a little bit later on down the track. So we're exploring different ways to partner with various people with the industry. Yeah. Break new ground, bonus content, and just exploring what's possible.
So if you haven't signed up to our Patreon, check it out. We always run a free month trial. So if you just go to the link in the bottom of the podcast description, that trial doesn't give you access to our WhatsApp group. So if you want to actually be part of the WhatsApps and everything, you have to sign up. But a lot of good content there. And like we say, we're going to work on that content as time goes on.
Yeah. And if you're a provider, supplier, whatever, and you'd like, no, let me say that again. And if you're a company out there that would like to provide educational content and teach it to our Patreon community, please get in touch. We are always looking for interesting new content to put up there. So it's a great opportunity to get to a very, I guess, engaged and switched on group of people that are really invested in their education and careers.
Yeah. Obviously with podcasts, they're not visual, or not most of them are, but with Patreon, we can put videos, procedures, techniques, all the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So into today's What's Trending in Aesthetics, we're going to start with something that maybe hasn't been overtly spoken about on socials or whatever, but you and I are having a chat upstairs over lunch, and we sort of dawned on us that this sort of drop in HA fillers over the last sort of year and a half, where I think we all accept that a lot of the companies are now not just not selling enough, but kind of struggling. So HA fillers have dropped, and there has been this trend, I guess, to lean on other devices or other products, particularly biostimulators. So it's become trendy for, products like Sculptra, Radiesse, other types of biostimulators to be used, I guess, as an adjunct to help people's tissues and for facial aging. But we've kind of realized that if this trend continues, we're going to be over-relying on biostimulators. Yeah. And we're overstuffing people in a different way. Yeah. And I guess the consequence of that, we haven't probably seen too often yet, but you're going to get quite overstimulated collagen production, kind of unusual faces, but in a different way.
Yeah, and it was actually highlighted. We did a podcast a few nights ago with Dr. Stephen Liu, and as we all know, there are different types of collagen, and some collagen is better than others. So, the collagen that's produced as a result of trauma and scarring is completely different to, natural collagen that just occurs through the body's natural repair processes. And what are the long-term consequences of using the one tool too much? Because HA is not an issue, it's just too much HA is an issue. And are we now going to jump from the fat into the frying pan?
Yeah. Look, I was talking about one example. I have a patient, I haven't seen her in a while actually, and I was just doing tox basically on her. But, she freely told me that she has been doing one of the biostimulators for about a decade. And she's seemingly doing it more than once a year. She's also had a ton of threads, which are in a way biostimulators. They create collagen through that channel. And just when you touch the tissues, it feels very unnatural, feels woody, firm.
Right.
Not pliable.
So they don't have the sort of pillow face look, but it's almost like they have the Pinocchio kind of wooden face.
Look, I mean, visually, yes, I would say she looks augmented, doesn't look natural. So from afar, it's just looks like she's had too much filler. But the type of filler she's having, when you touch the tissue, it doesn't feel bouncy and puffy like an HA overuse. It's firm.
Right.
And stiff. And, when you smile, it just doesn't move the same way. So a different problem. But yeah, I do worry that this sort of seemingly trendy move to, I don't do HA fill anymore, but I do biostimulators. That's fine. But again, that can be lent on too much.
Yeah.
And, obviously with new products coming to the market that are in that class and category, they're going to be used more.
Yeah.
Especially if they're more affordable or cheaper or, seemingly sort of more exciting. We could get new problems.
Yeah. So how do you know when it's too much? Because I guess these products have been such a small segment of people's businesses for such a long time. We probably didn't run into these issues normally. Yeah. I mean, we didn't know vascular occlusions were a thing until we started largely using HAs. So is it the same issue that there's a lurking problem that's going to raise its head at some point once we have some time under our belt as the amount of usage increases?
Well, let's get back to basics. Clinical photography, that keeps you and the patient honest.
Yeah.
So you've got your baseline photos and you're tracking them. If someone looks good, whatever good means, they don't need a treatment on that day. And, like we fell into this trap where we were told either on the back of the pharma packet or in the PI or just in the training that we got, filler every 6 months or every 12 months. We sort of fell into this routine of patients coming on 6 months and we delivered and did another 500,000 their lips, whatever it may be. That's not really how it should be done. We should be looking at our patient, treating people bespokely and matching it to their symptoms and concerns. So back to basic principles, we're taught, with various biostimulators, do 2 sessions over a few months, you build some collagen, and then maybe you do 2 vials every year, for example. That's fine as a loose rule, but look at your patient. They might not need it every year.
So I was always taught that if you had, say, a treatment like Sculptra, for example, that you'd need, 2 to 3 treatments around 6 to 8 weeks apart as an initial sort of scope of treatment. And then you might have it done once every 6 to 12 months or 18 months, depending on, how you present. And then that collagen would sort of get broken down and you're sort of back to baseline or close to baseline. So are we saying that you never get back to baseline, or it's sort of that scar tissue that's created is now there for life? And then so what's actually happening? Because you can see people that have had, say, Sculptra, for example. I'm not here to pick on Sculptra, but just, it's a product that's very popular. So you can see they've had a result. You can see before and afters. Yes, that gaunt looks disappeared. They look much more full and healthy in the face.
Yeah.
And then, okay, well, you can see now it's time for retreatment. Is it a matter of that there's still a residual amount of that scar tissue that's left, even though you look like you're back at baseline, and then it's just slowly over time, there's just residual scar tissue that's left behind, needed building on it. Is that what's actually happening? Because I thought it would, that collagen all disappeared.
So let's kind of relate this to HA, and we were told it all dissolves and you go back to square one, you do another one at 6 or 12 months. And we know that doesn't happen because of the MRIs and everything. So same kind of analogy with biostimulators, I won't use a brand. You create some scar tissue or collagen. Let's call it collagen. Scar tissue sounds bad, but it is. It's effectively a micro injury that you're creating with that biostimulator. The body forms some collagen around it, and that stays.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell you, it's indefinite. It's I don't know about forever. I don't want to use words that I can't prove, but it's going to be a long time. A scar or collagen doesn't just dissolve over 12 months. That's just not. It's just not reality.
Yeah.
Sure, the stimulator, the product that created the scar might be gone. And, you could argue, you need more because that has run out. But, like plastic surgeons have maybe sort of overly shouted about, when they do a facelift 10 years later, scar tissue is still there. So, this is why I'm saying we could overstimulate collagen to the point where it actually becomes counterproductive. You animate weirdly, you might look a bit strange, you look puffy with certain brands, and it's not what we're aiming for either.
Yeah. And so what do you do if you get to that point? Is there any way to reverse it, or is that now there for life? I mean, like at least with filler, you can kind of dissolve. You can dissolve it. I mean, the argument with HA is that, do you want to dissolve it? Is it worth collapsing someone's face after so many years of being overfilled and having the skin stretch?
I mean, that's still the beauty of HA, isn't it? It's reversible. Whether it's an emergency or an elective procedure, you can kind of get rid of it. It's not easy sometimes, but can basically get rid of it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of why with things like, biostimulators, we know they're not reversible. So I think they should be taught to more advanced practitioners who are proficient with a cannula. If you're going to use a needle, you've got to be really careful. I don't know many people in Australia who use needle with some of these products.
You mean there's more chance of an occlusion?
Yeah, especially if you're going to bolus it on a bone, which, I know some of the really experienced people in America do. That's how they do their biostimulators with a needle. But you can't really remove it. Or should I say you can't remove the consequence of the treatment, i.e. the collagen.
Right.
Well, I don't know how you would anyway. I don't, maybe there's someone out there that's cleverer than me, but I don't know a way of just dissolving, a sheet of collagen that's been produced by.
And how would you control how much collagen? Is it going to break down other collagen that you want? Yeah.
So I just thought we would flag that. And I guess that leads on to, well, yes, it's sort of a trend, but this regenerative aesthetic trend of using other products. So away from HA and away from biostimulators to things like Reduran or things like Profilo or things like Profilo Structura that's just been launched in Australia. We did a podcast on that a couple of weeks ago, but I think people, and both our patients but injectors, love the idea that you can use a product that is very temporary, but then it stimulates your own tissue to do its own thing. So rather than putting a blob of HA filler that stays there as a cross-linked volumizer, or putting some unorganized collagen that stays there indefinitely, you can use a regenerative product to stimulate your body's own fibroblasts or own superficial fat or dermis to make collagen and elastin in an appropriate, inverted commas, more natural way.
So maybe let's break that down a little bit. So let's just maybe revisit the different types of collagen that there is and the differences between what's created with the more traditional biostimulators and what these new sort of the polynucleotides are producing.
So I don't think we're arguing that they all make collagen. I'm just going to use the word collagen because there's about 30 subtypes and I don't even understand all of them. But, if you put in a biostimulator and you put in, I don't know, Reduran, different classes of injectable, they will both stimulate collagen. I think we can all accept that. It's just how much and the quality and also the organization of that collagen. So I always think, with something like a biostimulator, I sort of tried to explain to my patients, we've got all these injectables and even HA filler. We know if we put it in your dermis, for example, it's a dermal filler, just the act of that HA filler touching your fibroblasts will make it make hyaluronic acid. So they're all biostimulators technically. But I think what we mean by a biostimulator is something like Sculptra Radiesse, where there's no significant bulking effect.
The carrier disappears.
Filler. Correct. Or over time it will. But yeah, but if you're laying down, sort of fanning through a biostimulator in a liquid all over the side of the face, like you do with some of the traditional brands, it's kind of a little bit of a haphazard way of making collagen. I'm not knocking it. I use these products.
Yeah.
I'm just saying you've got to be careful with how many times you do that, because eventually I just imagine like a honeycombed, unorganized mess under the skin of just wherever you've passed your cannula and squirted your product, you almost get a line of cobwebs where that collagen forms, but it clearly doesn't look like your innate collagen.
Yeah. Okay. So the difference is that the more traditional ones are causing trauma, which is then giving your body's almost giving an emergency response, and it's creating like chaotic scar tissue collagen.
But net effect is
the same.
Looking firmer, minorly volumized and tighter. That's what we want.
Right.
But if you keep on doing it forever, it's going to probably have not good outcomes.
Right. And the newer forms are stimulating your body to produce natural collagen, not emergency scar tissue type collagen. Is that in layman's terms?
Yeah. I mean, again, if you did the histology of Profilo.
Yeah.
And you looked at the sort of the amount of collagen, but also the architecture of the cells, it looks normal. Yeah. I'm using inverted commas here again. You can't see me, but it doesn't look chaotic and unorganized and overstimulated and cobwebs everywhere. Just your fibroblasts look healthier, plumper. They're closer together. They're knitted together, and obviously the net effect of the skin feels plumper and bouncier and hydrated. Maybe that's sort of a bit of a rough way of describing it, but I think that we would all agree that the regenerative trend is probably the gold standard if we had a way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you're utilizing the body's ability to heal or produce its own, cellular architecture more than just stuffing it full of something that is kind of not natural.
Right. And so I'm still confused around biostimulator and biomodulator.
Biomodulator. You mean bioremodeler?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. So for those abroad or who don't have Profilo, we typically in Australia refer to Profilo as a bioremodeler. And we talk about things like Sculptra Radies and a new one called Juvelook as biostimulators. So bioremodeling, that's probably kind of the word is suggesting that the product is allowing your own tissues to remodel themselves. That's how I sort of imagine it. So again, it's not using a bulking agent like cross-linked filler. It's not leaving like an injury that is then causing a trauma response to make that collagen. The hyaluronic acid in Profilo, this is a good example. When you inject it, it's a non-cross-linked thermally linked product, if you want to get nerdy, and you can go back to listen to our podcast on how Profilo is made. But basically the HA in that talks to your fibroblasts. It signals to them to say, hey, wake up, do your thing, make some more collagen, make elastin, and also make hyaluronic acid. But after about 30, 40 days, the Profilo molecules are gone. They're not there for like months and years and found on an MRI. So it's almost like a signaler. It's remodeling in a different way to a traditional filler that just sits there indefinitely.
Right.
So that's kind of what we mean by remodeling.
Okay.
Biostimulator, it's, we're kind of stimulating collagen through, like we said, like a sort of a micro trauma type response, an inflammatory response.
Right.
So it's just the mechanism of how this stuff is turning on collagen is quite different, actually.
Okay. And so what's the take-home message if we wanted to summarize this point into sort of like, a single paragraph? Like what should people be thinking about now?
So if you've moved on to, biostimulators, which I agree with, I have as well, just be judicious with its use.
Yeah.
Don't fall into this trap of every 6 months, we're going to do another 2 vials because you're paying me.
Yeah.
Track yourself. Photos. So for example, not just all the angles and the expressions, but get them to have a pull on their skin and lean them forwards to assess the sag. Occasionally you'll find a patient who hasn't responded enough and they need more.
Yeah.
But just track what you're doing.
I guess don't inject with impunity thinking that there's no downside, because I think that's
because someone told you it's every 6 months.
Yeah. And because that's what we did with HA, and HA is great, but as we all know, we probably lent on it too much.
Yeah.
Now, don't do the same thing with this.
Yeah.
It's great, but too much of a good thing can sometimes be a bad thing.
100%.
And maybe let your patients know, hey, like this is a tool that we can use, but everything that you do has a consequence.
Yeah. And I guess, the obvious one is check out the regenerative aesthetic solutions. And there's more coming for sure.
Yeah.
When I was away in Dubai about a month or two ago, I just happened to stumble across Michael Caine speaking for an American company called ABG Labs. Now, I know very little about them, but some content that I've thrown into Patreon, I spoke to one of their sales reps, but they're doing injectable peptides.
Right.
So that's something we don't have here in Australia yet. So that's interesting because that's going to work on yet again a different pathway. So that might be something that could be useful as an adjunct to what you're already doing. I came across another really interesting product that is a liquid PCL, so polycaprolactone, that you can put on topically after, say, needling or laser or some mechanism to get it into the skin. So again, just new things are coming.
Yeah.
But don't lean on any one tool too much.
Yeah. Was it the same thing with skin needling as well? Because that's causing trauma.
I can't comment on, I guess, the degree of trauma that needling does, the device. Is it RF? Is it a pen? All of this is appropriate. But of course, the depth that we're at with something like biostimulation, you're in the subcuticular plane, which I doubt an RF needle would routinely go into. Not like at your laser clinic or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're all just different.
Yes. Interesting.
Another story that we came across, I have to admit, we don't know too much detail, but I thought it's worth saying because I think this has a wider impact across the world, is InMode, the company that make a lot of the devices. They recently
Morpheus 8, for example.
Correct.
Be the one that everyone's familiar with,
They recently won a court battle to fight counterfeit devices on the market that are sort of, I guess, pretending to be them.
Right. Who'd they win the battle against?
Well, the distributor. Everyone will have potentially heard of DHgate. It's a Chinese app that you can use to buy all sorts of stuff. It's like the Chinese Amazon.
Right.
So, this stuff has been trending recently because of everything to do with tariffs and people now buying counterfeit handbags on DHgate and taking them back to America for like, $10 Gucci bags, etc. But, they were also selling devices and marketing them as Morpheus 8.
Right. Okay.
So, forget, I guess, the specifics of the story, but the implication is the fact that there are a lot of counterfeit devices. Forget toxins and fillers. There's now, lasers and RF needling and so on that say they're one thing and they're not.
Yeah. Which could, other than the fact that the company will probably come after you for it and make you remove it from your clinic, what happens if you have a complication with this device and a patient decides to sue you? The insurance company will do its own investigation, and they're pretty good at finding ways not to pay out a claim. That's how insurance companies make money, is they take more money in premiums and they pay out in claims.
Yeah.
That's, it's not saying anything bad. It's just how business works. So if you've got a device that's not real, you might be in a situation where your insurance company goes, that device is counterfeit.
Definitely would. Not you might.
Yeah. I'm trying to be. Yeah. Okay. You're in big trouble. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a nice way of putting this, but if you're buying a device off DHgate, something not right there.
Yeah.
Your communication with the company is going to be minimal. And I know because I've tried it. I bought some underwear from DHgate just to see what quality it was, and it was rubbish. Didn't fit.
I don't want to go into detail.
But my point being that when you're communicating with, I can't say all of them, but many of the Chinese companies, it's actually quite cool. You write your question in English, it will auto-translate it to Chinese so they can read it. And then they write back in Chinese and it auto-translates back to English. My point being, you shouldn't be buying aesthetic products that way. Clearly you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And, for a branded product like Morpheus 8, everyone will be aware of that. If you own a clinic, you might have come across it. Very successful. You want to be dealing with the company. Let's just rule a line under this. You need to go to the device company, not just to get the product, but for the training, support, equipment, servicing, all the things that we must have spoken about on the podcast before. But it's quite scary.
Well, these things will happen more as things get tougher in the economy. So people are going to find ways to get their products and supplies at a cheaper price. So someone in a desperate position might not realize the implications. They might not think it through properly.
Desperate doctors equals problems.
Desperate anyone have problems, yeah.
Yeah. So, have you ever encountered any of this in your own business dealings with clinics or providers where they've been in this situation?
Well, if they have, they never admitted it to me. No, I haven't come across anyone that's bought counterfeit product or devices, but I kind of feel like that it's kind of on the rise now as things get tighter, and we'll kind of lead into the next part of our discussion around suppliers even starting to find it more difficult, is that people will find a certain percentage of the population will gravitate towards desperate solutions because things have become more difficult. So I think there's probably more of that to come, which is not only counterfeit devices, but counterfeit injectables, which we've already discussed many times before, people trying to do treatments themselves. It's all part of the same problem. As people still want these treatments and can't afford them or can't afford to deliver them, they'll find a solution, but that solution comes with consequences, and they're just taking a risk.
So, I mean, this is where I've got real, not sympathy, but I support the regulators really trying to drill down on what the hell is going on out there. Who's doing these services? Do clinics need a license? Can you provide evidence of where you bought your stock? How is your stock stored, and how are you servicing your devices? I'm all for that. But, here in Australia, it's felt quite punitive. And I know that this has been trending in Texas, particularly in the States with regulation. And now it's kicked off again in the UK with face-to-face consultations now being expected. So I don't think we can escape this. So if you are tempted to buy a product, a device, or a toxin or whatever from your not usual supplier, just please don't.
From DHgate?
Yeah, I don't know if I've touched on this on the podcast. When I was in Dubai, 6 weeks ago, I took it upon myself to wander around the exhibition hall, which was the biggest one I've ever seen in my life. It was honestly,
did you get your steps in?
Definitely got my steps in, but it was quite shocking. I sent some photos to IA WhatsApp group, but I must have come across at least 20 or 30 toxins that I've never heard of before. And, I'm talking to the rep and the company in front of me, and I'm asking them very simple questions like, hello, so I've never heard of this toxin, and no joke, they're charging $20 for a vial, like peanuts. I'm like, can you just talk to me about the background to this, the studies,
what's your purification process?
Yeah, where's it made? Very, very shady.
Right.
Just, they give you this,
glossy brochure.
Almost, well, it's not even glossy. It's like you could have done a better job at those brochures.
That's saying a lot, yeah.
And it's like, wow, these people are actually representing themselves at a major conference, and they can't give me the data of where it's made or any studies or nothing.
Well, who's letting the people into these conferences?
Well, that's another question, isn't it? But I guess my point being that you really got to think about if this sounds too good to be true, if it's too cheap to be true, it's too something. Well, they can't give you the data that you would want to basically go to a court of law and defend yourself.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's quite scary, actually.
Yeah. But I think we're going to see more of it.
Yeah.
I think it's just the beginning, to be honest.
Well, let's sort of, you sort of alluded to it. So at least here in Australia, I'm sure it's happening elsewhere. I mean, I know that in the UK, one of the laser companies has collapsed recently. But here in Australia, one of our major distributors of at least a filler and certain products like threads collapsed, went into administration. It kind of gives a big glimpse into the whole consolidation of not just the market, but also clinics suffering, but now distributors and suppliers are suffering.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that, because it's quite concerning.
Well, it is. And I mean, I spoke about it so many times, I got sick of hearing myself say it, but the consolidation of the market, which we said was coming, it was just not if, it was when. And, I used to give the analogy of the row of dominoes. At some point in time, no matter where you are in that domino chain, you're going to be affected. So as more injectors have come into the market because, the telehealth model opened it up, so you had more people, therefore price gets driven down because there's more supply and patients have more choice. And then so providers, nurses, doctors are now competing with far more people and have to have a competitive edge. And the easiest lever to pull is price.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you've got the chain clinics as well. And so eventually everyone that was just happy to buy products that, people weren't so concerned about the price because the margins were so big. But now as things become tighter, so you've got the increased competition, plus you've got people spending less, increasing their time between treatments. they're now starting to, and as I've been preaching for a long time, as a clinic owner, as a provider, you need to really know what your margins are. So people are starting to take, it's probably not just my advice. I mean, any person that's reasonable with numbers will tell you the same thing. You need to know like how much profit you're making on the treatments that you're selling. So people who kind of just didn't really look into that too much now going, okay, well, if I buy toxin A and it costs me this much and my profit margin is this, what happens if I just change to product B? How much difference does that make to my bottom line? So people are now making decisions to go with certain suppliers based on the margin that it's going to mean to them and their businesses. And so that then has an effect on suppliers because they're being forced to discount their prices. And these businesses, all businesses are expensive to run. So, the next obvious person or entities within that domino chain is the suppliers. And I think what we've seen now is probably the first of a few more to come, which is suppliers that combined with the drop in HA, which is a big part of their portfolios, clinics becoming more discerning about where they're buying. They're not, they tend to be less loyal to a particular brand anymore because we all know we've got quite a few good solutions and products within every category of treatments. And so they're looking at what's the company going to do for me and how much margin am I going to make? And so there's going to be fatalities there as well.
Yeah. I heard a story, I won't mention the company, but in the States, at least one of the big pharma companies is probably going to lay off about 25% of their sales staff, which, America's a massive market. So, no one wants to lose staff, but 25%, that's huge.
Yeah.
So again, I've heard anecdotally, not just in America, but UK and here, the reps are under a lot of pressure. Their managers are saying, "Hey, you're not hitting your targets."
Well, I've heard reps telling me that their upper layers of management are still hammering them on filler sales.
Yeah, and it's like,
what do you want me to do?
You don't need to read the tea leaves. It's fairly explicit. We've spoken about on the podcast, and everyone knows that we're using less HA now.
Yeah,
up to 40% in some markets. So you can't sell the same numbers you were doing a year or two ago. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But add on, forget the fact that the products, like we mentioned at the start, we're using different products now, but also there's a tight squeeze on the whole economy.
Yeah.
We're just spending less.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that leads us to the next point, which might upset a few people. And I'll just put it out there that a lot of my good friends are reps that I've known in the industry for a long time. So this is not a slight at you at all. I think that you're all great people. But looking at this logistically, if I was the owner of a large pharma corporation, I'd be thinking, well, what is the role of my rep now?
Yeah.
There are lots of places for injectors to get education, whether it be webinars, things like our Patreon group, for example, YouTube, even though we know we sort of take a bit of a jab at people educating themselves through YouTube. But I mean, people do it. I mean, it's video content. As long as you're looking at a reputable educator, I don't see the major issue with it, as long as it's not your only source of education.
Yeah, there's some good ones as well, yeah.
So what do you actually need a rep for? How much does a rep cost a company per year? And what is their role? Because everything's online now. People order online. They can educate themselves online.
Yeah.
And, and the difficulty is that a lot of these reps and the clinical educators that work for these companies, they're restricted with what they can say and teach because of the on-label, off-label disparity.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's a great point. I don't know if I've got anything extra to sort of add. I mean, I personally don't need much support from a rep.
Yeah.
Comfortable with the products. I will call when I need to, and I get good support when I call. But do I need someone to come to the clinic with leaflets and brochures and face maps and all that stuff? No, I don't. Maybe you could argue for newer injectors, they're a really important crutch and sort of link to training opportunities and the wider world of aesthetics. A newbie knows nothing. And so I remember Nina, who used to work at Allergan.
Hi, Nina.
She was at your clinic. Hey, Nina. Well, she's still with Allergan.
Yes.
But she sort of changed role, but she was super helpful for me.
Yeah.
Just a touch point for random questions. Yes, accessible for training, but also probably pivotal in me becoming KOL in some way. I don't know exactly how that worked, but she probably identified me as an injector that they might want to look at. So I'm not saying it's sort of a defunct role, but I do think the world's moved on.
So maybe the rep role will change rather than becoming defunct. Maybe there's just a different level of expectation. Maybe there'll be less of them.
Or focusing those resources on the people who really need it rather than spreading themselves too thin.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I don't know what the ROI is. Someone the other day told us that it could cost sort of around $2,000 for a rep to visit a clinic. I couldn't really work out how or why that number was 2,000.
Well, I don't know what a rep gets paid, probably 100,000 to 200,000 a year. If you look up how much time they spend going to different clinics per day, then what are they taking with them? I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes, I don't know. Maybe we all have to evolve. And maybe pharma needs to be done differently. I mean, the way things are going here in Australia, where scripting through some of the bigger corporate companies, then the product comes from a pharmacy, maybe pharma's role has to change, at least here in Australia, because that link will be kind of gone.
Well, it kind of already is now. I mean, a lot of people that I talk to don't have direct relationships with pharma because they're dealing with a scripting company. So the scripting company kind of is the intermediary.
Yes.
And then they kind of doing, so if we look at, say, Fresh, for example, they do a lot of their training in-house. So they now sort of taking the role.
Yes.
In some
so they're
ways.
like a third-party trainer, supplier.
Yeah.
But of course, all the pharma companies are probably behind that, working out the training that Fresh are delivering.
But I guess the advantage is they can talk off label.
I think it's the way to go, if I'm completely honest. I mean, we were talking upstairs about this difficulty of pharma trying to support and help and train us, but they've got such tight handcuffs on. They're so rigid in what they can legally do. It's not their fault. But again, maybe that's great for beginners. So you need to learn one way. It's like learning to drive, both hands on the steering wheel, check the wing mirror every 5 seconds, and you just got to do it properly.
Yeah.
And after 6 months, you learn different ways of driving, and same for injecting.
Yeah. I don't think it's a matter of, just cutting people for the sake, but I just think it's how are we going to do business smarter? How can we more, I guess, useful to the clinics that we're supporting? And how do you sort of survive in the economy and in the market that's getting tougher?
Yeah.
So I hope no reps out there took offense to that.
Yes, we love you still. Please keep on making good products.
Yeah, it's just like asking the obvious questions because everyone's starting to feel the pinch.
Yeah, for sure. Another trend that I came across, this is kind of quite interesting. It mainly affects, obviously, America, but it did happen here in Australia. It's the FDA. So the regulator in America, they have banned compounded GLPs, or the Ozempics, the semaglutamides,
the fat drug, is that?
Manjaros. Yes, those ones. I think it's a big thing, mainly for America, because most aesthetics clinics in America are offering weight loss solutions.
Yeah.
It's a big part of their business, kind of an obvious one in a way. I think it was sort of a smart move, but lots of them were providing compounded versions of these weight loss drugs. Now, I can't comment on what was good and what was bad, but clearly the FDA thought it was bad because they were getting reports of patients being hospitalized through various reasons, constipation, vomiting, pain, and some of the side effects of the drugs. But the point being, a compounded drug is not the actual, drug that is supplied to the public with a study and a trial and a safety sort of record.
It's like a replica.
It's a replica. It's similar. It's designed to do the same thing, but it's not the same thing.
It doesn't go through the same sort of standardized processes and sort of, it's not made in the same environment to the same level of scrutiny.
And, I know nothing about compounding pharmacy, but I would assume that if you go to one pharmacy and another pharmacy, they're similar, but they're different.
You might get slightly different variants.
Yeah, preservatives or volumes or slight dose adjustment, or it could be as simple as the way it's administered. The branded ones like Ozempic, they come in a special pen with a clicker and it's all very easy. But if you make a compounded one, they'll often come in a vial and you've got to draw it up yourself in a syringe. So just the chance of overdosing or underdosing or injuring yourself or doing it wrong just becomes way more apparent with a different version of the compounded version.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing, because I guess if you were leaning on compounded products as part of your business, you now can't do that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the cynical side of me may also say maybe these pharma companies are lobbying the FDA because it's taking away their business. There could be an element of that too.
Well, they probably did or do, but also because it gives their brand a terrible name if people go into hospital because they, inverted commas, had Ozempic when they didn't.
Yeah, true.
That's terrible. I wouldn't want that as a company.
Yeah, because it's like Kleenex or Hoover or Botox even. Everyone assumes that's associates all the different options out there under that one brand. So that one brand takes all the good and bad of all the other products that are associated, because it was, I guess, the first to market, becomes the recognized brand.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of cropped up a few years ago. Allergan have a brand of fat dissolver called Belkyra here in Australia. It's Carbella in America. But we'd already had something called LipoDissolve, or like a compounded version of fat dissolver many years ago. I never sort of used those ones. And so a lot of people went, the Belkyra technique is, so many dots and so many mils per injection, and you put a template on.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use my LipoDissolve, but kind of use the Allergan way of doing it, which made no sense to me. Because hold on, guys, you're confusing yourself here. You're using a compound product that has no technical or study data or safety data, dosing data, and you're applying a approved version to try and make it more legitimate. And that really annoyed me. I got really on my high horse about this because I was like, it's not science. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And that's a problem because then it's marketed to the patient as the real deal, the real thing, potentially.
Yeah.
And so you had people sort of scrambling around looking for the tattoo templates that come with Belkyra to use in their non-Belkyra procedure.
They're buying it from DHgate.
Well, again, who knows? But anyway, it's interesting that the TGA here in Australia had a same compounded ban of GLPs last October.
Right. Okay.
I think I'm right in saying that. So same reasons. When I looked into why that happened, hospitalizations, people underdosing, overdosing, doing it wrong, but also concerns about the quality of the compounded products.
Yeah, right.
So if we extend this argument back to sort of our device chat, if you're using product that isn't legit, if you want to put it that way, there are problems associated with that. And you've got to ask yourself, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Why have you chosen to do it?
Because, when you're setting like the energy to administer to someone's skin, if that's not standardized,
burn them.
Yeah, you could cause major injuries.
Electrocute them. Who knows?
Yeah, not good. It's just an ever evolving situation.
But if you think again from the regulator's perspective, they're probably looking at clinics going, these guys are just dodgy. They're not even using the real stuff anymore.
It's just people in general. It's
I don't mean that the people, if you're listening and you did use compounded stuff, I'm not saying you're dodgy, but from the regulator's perspective, there's clearly a problem here.
Yeah. I mean, if you got it through a compound, I would still see a compounding pharmacy as a legitimate legal source. As a layperson, I would think that. I get stuff compounded through the pharmacy. Not GLP-1, but
I'm trying to, I don't know enough about pharmacokinetics or pharmacy to sort of fully understand what it means to compound, but
it could be an interesting podcast, actually.
Yeah, 100%. If, for example, you wanted to compound a local anesthetic cream, I think that you would be hard pushed to find something that's, not safe or as long as you use it correctly within.
Well, we've already seen it. It's used so widely. We've already seen it if there's an issue.
Yes. Now, again, maybe the issue with compounded locals is that you can overdose someone if you use too much. But if you use it correctly and it's topical and it's essentially lidocaine, tetracaine, benzocaine, or one of the canes, it makes sense you can compound that, because it's just a cream.
Yeah.
But something injected that is supposed to work on your appetite hormones that's not gone through a vigorous trial and made in a preserved, safe way, I would argue just my limited knowledge of it seems more likely to go wrong.
Yeah, probably.
And that's what we've seen happen.
Okay, well.
So just think about what you buy and who you buy it from. And I always think of these things. Worst case scenario, if I'm in a court of law and I've got to justify why I made a decision, it can't because it was cheaper. That's not going to work.
That won't go well. My accountant advised me
because the H date they send on the day. That's not a good reason to buy.
They'll blame me. Dave said you need 70% margin.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is our main topics.
Yeah, I guess we were going to maybe touch on some of the regulation changes. We've covered Australia infinitely, but obviously Texas we've spoken about. Then there was a ban recently in the UK.
Yeah, I'm sort of mindful that these things are still evolving. Yeah. But if someone in the UK is willing to come on and talk about it in detail, we'll do one of our industry updates specifically for your region with some bonus content. But I'm mindful that these trending ones, we don't want to overburden with all the nerdy regulatory stuff. It gets a bit heavy. And I guess if you're really interested in, the UK, for example, we'll do a dedicated episode as a bonus episode. So hopefully that has stimulated our listeners to think about how they practice, what they buy, devices.
Or at the very least, entertained you on your way to and from work.
Yes. So join us for our competition draw tonight on Instagram Live. David will be somewhere in Europe. Hopefully I'll wake you up and annoy you.
Thank you.
And one of you will be a lucky winner and join us in Canada.
See you soon, guys. Good luck.
Bye. For our latest news, follow us on Instagram at Inside Aesthetics Podcast. If you want to get in touch with myself or David, follow us on Instagram as well at Dr. Jake Sloane and David_Inside Aesthetics.
Join our Patreon for invaluable business and injectable education. Get access to our global community of like-minded professionals, live and interactive Zoom sessions, hints and tip videos, webinars, and more. Head over to www.insideaesthetics.com/Patreon for more information.